For several years, just after moving to Central Oregon, every fall I would put on a striped shirt and a striped hat and become a football referee for high school and middle schools. I joined the association called the Central Oregon Football Officials Association, otherwise known as COFOA, C-O-F-O-A. We would meet weekly to discuss the past week's games and the upcoming games and learn more about our craft, sharpen our skills and our knowledge, and to receive our next game officiating assignments. Daryl Knabe was one of our church members here, and he was a long-time member of COFOA. He had been officiating games for many years and had pretty much established himself as a leading authority in the entire state of Oregon as an expert on the game's rules and officiating mechanics. If anyone ever had a question, Daryl provided the definitive answer. We traveled together, Daryl and I, to all of our COFOA meetings from here in La Pine, as well as to any games that we were mutually assigned to officiate. As his pastor and fellow referee, we became very close friends. On our journeys back and forth, he was actually mentoring me to get better and better at our refereeing tasks. Now, let me tell you, referees are a very close-knit group. There is a natural bond, a closeness that is rarely experienced by any other association of people I have ever experienced. The referees have to stick together. They must support each other as a solid unit down on the field. Otherwise, the game gets out of hand. Everything would turn to mayhem. Sometimes, if coaches or players or fans up in the stands don't like a call that was made, the officiating crew, every one of them, is their enemy. And there is a war that breaks out, in essence, that every ref feels, and they are greatly outnumbered by those who are furious. So we must have one another's back and respond as a unit. There's very strong incentive to support and help one another. Once those stripes are put on, referees stick together, walking onto the field together and walking off the field together. And even long after the game is finished, never a bad word or criticism is uttered against a fellow referee. That camaraderie is strong on the field as well as off the field. On one of my trips home with Daryl, I opened up to him. Daryl, I'm so burdened by an observation, and I'm really ashamed to even mention it. I have to ask this because it's bothering me. Is it just me, or is the close brotherhood and bonding that I feel with all the other referees, isn't that something we should experience with our fellow believers at church? Daryl, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I don't. It feels wonderful as a football referee to have such strong camaraderie with others because we're working so hard side by side down in the trenches together. We battle to do what is best for everyone and what is the right thing and the right call. But how come this unity is not so predominant with fellow believers at church? Daryl, himself a dedicated church member here, a superb referee, was silent for a moment or two. Then he answered, "Yeah, I've noticed that too. I've felt the same way for many years." Daryl soon afterward got cancer. He's been at home with the Lord for about 10 years now. He probably knows the answer to our question. And as I've continued pondering in bewilderment, I might be closer to an understanding that Daryl probably is being comforted with right now. Yes, there is a close tie among football officials. And there is a close tie, maybe even closer, among military war veterans who fought for their very lives together. But what is different about the closeness believers who should experience the same kind of close ties and unity is the fact that there are evil spiritual forces who have no greater threat than churches that experience a proper unity. And these evil forces are led by a commander whose very name means divider, disunifier. Diabolos is the Greek word for devil. That certainly means divider. So Satan and his cohorts have every incentive and use natural and supernatural means to keep church members from the closeness that we really do need to have. They concern themselves with preventing unity in the church. I'm certain to a far greater degree than to any other group here on earth. Those don't concern them as much as the church being unified. Strong camaraderie may come more naturally for game officials and war veterans, but the church has devoted evil schemers with powerful ploys that we must defeat. Satan will use people in the church, and often those people don't even realize that he is using them. People can divide by robbing us of our joy. Paul was facing his problems with people at Rome. We know this because we saw that in Philippians 1, verses 15 through 18 when we were studying those verses. But he also had his problems with people in Philippi. And it was the people in Philippi that concerned him the most. You see, when Epaphroditus had brought a generous gift from the church at Philippi, and good news he also brought to Paul, there was also some bad news. The bad news was that there were two different divisions in the church family that was happening back in Philippi. Now, apparently there was this double threat to the unity of the church. In chapter 3, we're going to look at the first threat. We're going to read about that. There were false teachers that moved into the church, and they were telling them that they all had to become Jewish converts if they were to get any benefit from their Christian faith at all. First, they have to become Jewish. We'll see that in Philippians chapter 3, verses 1 through 3, where Paul addresses that one. And then the second element we'll get to when we get to the 4th chapter of Philippians. We're going to see that there were 2 disagreeing women members in the church, and all the other members of the church were taking sides, lining up behind one or the other. That's in Philippians 4, verses 1 through 3. What Euodia and Syntyche were catfighting about, Paul doesn't state, but I'm sure that it was something as nonsensical as perhaps they both wanted to be president of the missionary guild, or they both wanted to sing the solo in the Easter cantata, or they had a disagreement of what color to paint the women's bathroom. If you were the Apostle Paul, and you were sitting in a prison cell hundreds of miles away, and you saw the division taking place, how would you try to intervene and solve these divisive issues? Now, some of us might issue a set of commands, rules to follow. You must immediately do this. You must obey me. Uniformity, behaviors that everybody must conform to, is usually our answer to most of the issues that divide people. Everyone must comply to these rules, these manners, these actions, and unity will result. Shape up and fly right. Do I need to come knock some heads together? Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Are you ready? Paul knew what many church workers do not know today. There is a difference between unity and uniformity. True spiritual unity comes from within, and it's a matter of the heart. That's unity. Unity works its way from inside of us to the outside, and then it becomes expressed through external behaviors. And its results are longer lasting. Uniformity, on the other hand, starts as external pressure, threats, rules. Starts as this external pressure outside of ourselves. Now, Paul wisely saw that the church at Philippi was in need of unity, not uniformity. So he ends up saying to the church, here in Philippians chapter 2, which we open today, I'll first paraphrase it for you. Your disagreements reveal that there is a spiritual problem deep inside each of you. It isn't going to be solved by rules or threats. It is only going to be solved when your hearts are right with Christ and with each other. I've paraphrased our verses for today. You see, Paul wanted them to see that the basic cause of their disunity was selfishness. And the cause of selfishness is pride. There can be no unity among believers, as well as no joy of the Christian life for those who put themselves above others. Now, the Apostle Paul is about to teach us that rules and threats are never the best way to solve a church conflict. It is really astounding what Paul does here. From hundreds of miles away from them, he elicits a bunch of sweet individual recollections deep inside that each of them have. They're deep, sweet recollections of the supernatural work that God has been doing in them. Folks, this is practical wisdom. You see, Paul knew that in order to have unity come from within, he's got to stir their hearts within. He's got to stir some definite memories. Now listen, this works for us. This is a good strategy for you and me. When pride is prominent in our life, when we just don't want to consider others as more important than ourselves, when we don't want to put the needs of others ahead of our own, number one, we're disrupting unity in the church more than we know. Number two, we experience a loss of joy as followers of Christ. And number three, we need to actively recall the very memories that Paul elicits from these Philippian believers as the starting point of our solution. Finding specific memories, definite examples of how these concepts that Paul raises here, that they're true in our own life, that we can see, is our key to victory. So let's take a look now at what Paul encourages us to keep forefront, to remember on a regular basis. I take you now to Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Now, Paul uses what Greek scholars call first-class conditions in this first verse here. These four ifs that we see in Philippians 2:1 are not meant to communicate uncertainty, as if Paul wasn't sure that there was encouragement in Christ, consolation of love, fellowship in the Spirit, or affection and compassion in the Christian life. Rather, these things, because they're first-class conditions, they are assumed to be true. It's like a dad saying to his son, if you're my son, and if I'm your father, and if you're only 7, and if I'm the head of the home, then go clean your room. In the Greek language, a first-class condition speaks of certainty. And if could be translated since, or even because. 1, because there is encouragement. 2, because there is comfort from his love. 3, because there is fellowship with the Spirit. 4, because there is experience of tenderness and compassion of God. Because of these 4 things, you and I are to be like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. These are 4 important areas that all of us need to acknowledge. We need to consider specific examples where we have seen it in our life. How Christ has been at work inside of us. We must acknowledge what he is doing and what he has done for us as a continual incentive for us to be like-minded, to have the same love, and to be one in spirit and purpose. So now let's separate each one of these and let's examine them. The first experience that we should actively recall, that we should actually ponder, would be examples where Christ has encouraged us. Has there been a time that you could point to when internally you felt an overwhelming, beyond a natural sense, an impression of peace or encouragement that Christ was pleased with you? If it really was Christ, it doesn't elevate a sense of pride. Oh, God's happy with me. No, instead, there's kind of a, I'm glad that I pleased you, Lord, but I am so unworthy. A sense of unworthiness. You allowed him to work through you, and you sensed his pleasure in it. But there's this, wow, Lord, thank you. I want to tell you about such an experience I had this week. I don't want it to sound like a personal boast. It isn't. In fact, I displayed horrible behavior until Christ rescued me and gave me insight and ability that had to have been from him. Afterward, I sensed his encouragement. It was Tuesday night. I was at home grading papers for my college class at the community college in Bend. I've been concerned over the last couple of terms in what I think I see as a rising of cheating among college students, blatant cheating. I came across a paper that had been turned into me online, and it had all the markings that I was sure it was plagiarism. And by those markings, when you copy something from the internet, from a website, and you put it in a Microsoft Word document, which this was in, the font turns very light. And this had that. It had a sidebar also on this particular document, and there were instructions as if they were being given to the person who submitted the paper. When you say this, do that. Clearly, I thought, this person needs to be confronted, and I did. You've got a 0 until you come talk to me tomorrow. I got there early, so did she. She immediately had an uncommon respect, and that scored some points right away. We spoke privately. She explained how she had put several hours into working on the paper and how badly my accusation had hurt her. She said, I just don't know what I could do to convince you that I did not plagiarize. She explained the sidebar was a tool that she discovered on Microsoft Word so that when she rehearses her speech, she has her own private instructions. Oh. She explained why the font was lighter because she did her research on her tablet, went home to her computer, and transferred it to the computer to send it to me. Oh. Immediate relief fell across her whole body. She nearly fell to the ground. She nearly collapsed when I said, I have never been so happy to be wrong. And I'm sorry. I feel very relieved, actually, that I had misjudged your paper. When class was over, I had pulled her aside and done all this, but we went through class and so forth. She walked out with a multiple. She kept turning around, thank you, thank you, thank you, as she went dancing down the hall. I believe that Christ rescued me from making a horrible mistake. And then he gave me an overwhelming sense that he had used me in doing right, even though I was hit with a great sense of, wow, I could have so easily blown it. Are there times when your heart almost seems to burst out singing or shouting, thank you, thank you, thank you? Because the Lord has encouraged you in a certain way. Maybe he spared you from something. Thank you that you are with me right now, Lord. Well, don't let those times flee from your memory. The next type of experience we need to focus our minds on that Paul is encouraging us out of our passage is any comfort from love. What evidence have you noticed that you are unconditionally loved by Christ? Does God cast away the believer who offends him or makes a mistake or whenever we sin? No. On the contrary, his love is always reaching out farther as he seeks to draw us back to himself. That same love must flow through us to others. It must be your incentive as you live with other believers. This remembrance is crucial for us to keep in our memory. Think of it. There would never be any internal strife in any church, anywhere, where God's unconditional love is fully appreciated. The moment that the love of Jesus ceases to be real to us, that is the moment we lose our affection for others. Once we begin to think that we have somehow earned God's favor, that we deserve it, Christ's love ceases to be real to us. And we will never have a proper love for others. It just won't happen. Are you aware of Christ's unconditional love for you? Don't allow your appreciation of it to grow stale. Now, the next type of experience we need to focus our minds on is any participation of the Spirit. And I understand this to mean the Holy Spirit. This is not merely a human fellowship like the fellowship of referees or military veterans, or between any other friends who have a number of things in common. It is not man-centered, The fellowship that exists between Christians is a fellowship created by God. It exists not because we have so much in common, but because by grace we have been made mutually dependent on one another as members of Christ's body. I saw a wonderful example of this Wednesday night. Actually, I see it every Wednesday evening when we have Awana here at the church. But this past Wednesday, we had one of our workers in need of staying home because of illness. Oh no. That was my first thought. But that thought quickly left me because other workers immediately began to make adjustments of their regular assignments. They did so joyfully, and they came up with practical solutions that, frankly, I never would have thought of. This was a strong example to me of the fellowship created by God. Another word for fellowship is partnership. And that was obvious to me on Wednesday evening. Oh, there are so many other examples of this everywhere I look around Living Water Church. Grief Share Ministry. Every Thursday night, there's another example. Friday morning cleaning crew. Several sweet, God-centered fellowships that we were reminded of last week at our annual meeting. There is a definite sense of partnership that surrounds us here. There is an uncommon display of grace where God has made us mutually dependent on one another as members of Christ's body. The fourth, recollection. Any affection and sympathy. Now, this one is more exactly the divine compassion and mercy that came from Christ himself to us at salvation, and how it is to pass through us to others. Paul is so emotionally compelling here. He tries to activate our, as it were, spiritual cell phone videos. Better grab it before Google takes it away because you have too much storage. So look back at any time when compassion and sympathy that you've been able to express, it wasn't natural to you, it had to have come from the Lord. Wow. You notice it flowing through. And I use the cell phone thing as just metaphor. Obviously, you're not going to go around taping these things. But in your mind's eye, go back and picture this. You know, it might be that you'd have to ask God, direct my mind to one of those situations. If one doesn't come to your mind right away, just ask him, Lord, would you show me? It's very important. There's a lot at stake in this practical exercise. In fact, this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow morning, open up Philippians 2, verse 1. Go back through these areas. Ask God to help you recall specific examples of where he has been at work in your life through all four of these. Then reflect on each of them. You know what that'll do? It's going to motivate you. It's going to incentivize you to be a better worker for God's kingdom. And it will result in greater joy. Now, Paul's saying that it is the way to catapult us into greater unity, far greater unity that can be experienced with any man-centered brotherhood on earth. We would have the same mind, same love, and in full accord with one mind. Now, in verse 2, notice that these results, this unity, as he describes it, it begins with the words, the same mind, and it ends with of one mind. Both speak of a life that is intent on a unified purpose, a single goal. And what might that be? What is the unified goal? The gospel. Paul mentioned the gospel 5 times in the first chapter, and in the 5th mention, verse 27, he declared, "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel." That's the commanding theme all the way through until he almost gets to the end of chapter 2. So the call here in Philippians 2:2 to be of the same mind, have the same love, being of full accord of one mind, is the plea that the Philippians and us be gospel-oriented as we relate to and care for each other. You know, we sure enjoy a lot of wonderful food here every Sunday before church. Did you have a chance to try some of those cinnamon rolls today that Gordon brought? Wow. You know, I am so impressed with these delights. Very often it's a full breakfast out there. It's put out for us before worship. But I would hate to think that is the main reason any of us come here each week. We have people gathered around tables in our fellowship room before church starts. It's great to visit with each other, to catch up on how everybody's week has gone. We joke, we talk sports, we talk cooking, we talk fishing if Mike or Jake are at your table, or just life in general. But I hope that is not the main reason why you come. I hope you don't come because it's merely a habit, a tradition, or because you think it might disappoint or anger somebody important to you in your life. If you didn't come. Listen, I hope that you are here and that you come every week for no lesser reason than you are like-minded with us to advance the gospel through such things as kids' church, Awana, Grief Share, Monday night home Bible study, and the message that goes out over the internet. I hope that you are with us in order to have a fire lit inside of you that yearns to get the gospel out. But let me be extraordinarily blunt. If you are here for any other reason, other than to personally know Christ better and better, and to make him known to others, then you are simply wasting your time. You won't have any real benefit. I believe our passage today has sought to incentivize every one of us to know Christ through deeper personal relationship with him. By being like-minded with each other, being intent on the same purpose, getting the gospel out. And we need to have strong unity to accomplish it. Verses 3 and 4. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also the interests of others. I would say, and I've read from many other pastors and theologians, they also say, Most of the difficulties in the church today are not due to doctrinal differences. They're due to selfish ambition and conceit. Some people just naturally cause trouble. If we could follow this injunction, let nothing be done from selfish ambition or conceit, I think it would solve 90%, maybe 100% of the problems churches face today. If you're doing something, a ministry, a work in the church, if you're doing anything out of selfish ambition in the church, you'd better not do it at all. Same is true if you do things because you expect to be recognized. J. Vernon McGee says, one of the reasons I don't like to go to organizational meetings is that I get tired of people having to thank Mrs. So-and-so because she brought a bouquet of petunias, or Mr. So-and-so because he brought an extra chair. And you don't dare leave out anyone, because if you do, you will be in trouble. Do Christians need to be recognized and complimented and commended for things they do? Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, trying to make a name for yourself. Now, after approaching the problem from a negative point of view, Paul then adds a positive approach. But in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. What? Count others? Huh? Oh no, that's not very realistic. I'm sorry. Well, that would be true if this is an external rule being enforced upon us. But you see, Paul has already prepared us so that it might come from within us. He's tried to elicit a heart response from inside of us, rising out of those specific evidences that we have seen of Christ at work in our lives. Maybe you're old enough to remember that during the TV coverage of the 1984 Summer Olympic Games, a commercial featured world record holder Bob Beamon. And in the commercial, Bob Beamon said this: "Back in the Olympic Games of 1968, I set a world record in the long jump. At the time, some people said no one would ever jump that far again, 29 feet, 2.5 inches. Well, over the years, I've enjoyed sitting in front of my television set and watching them try. But now there's a new kid, I'm told, who might have a chance of breaking my record. Well, there's just one thing I have to say about that." At this point, the viewer is set up for some kind of self-centered, defiant comment. Instead, Beamon's face softened, and in the most believable way, he said, "I hope you make it, kid." True humility delights in the success of other people, even when that success is at our own expense. Others is the key to this passage. If you live for others, at least 4 things must happen. First, spend time recalling these areas. Philippians 2, verse 1. Focus on them. Focus on specific examples where you have seen Christ encouraging you. Look at examples of his comfort of love, the evidence that you were loved by him despite of who we are, sinners, unconditionally loved by him. Look for examples of any participation, fellowship of the Spirit that you've been brought into by God to be a part of, a partnering. And look for any affection and any sympathy that it was him through you being expressed to others. Second, admit that in yourself you do not care for others, and left to yourself, your choice will always be Satan's choice rather than the choice of Christ. Your way will be the way of self-boasting and pride. And it will always be joyless and harmful to others. Third, humble yourself before God. Peter writes, "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you." Fourth, the final step involves a daily fellowship with Christ. He is the source of our life, and we must stay close to the source if we're to realize the self-giving life that he advocates. Without him, we could do nothing. On the other hand, Paul says, "I can do everything through him who gives me strength." Philippians 4:13. The conductor of a symphony orchestra was once asked what the most difficult instrument to play is. He responded, "Second violin. I can find plenty of first violinists, but to find someone who can play second violin with enthusiasm, that is a problem. But if we have no second violin, we have no harmony." It takes more grace than I can tell to play the second fiddle well. Pray with me, please.